The grand hall of Winterbourne Citadel was colder than any room had a right to be. Cold lived in the black marble floor beneath Aria Blake's thin slippers. Cold breathed from the ribbed stone columns that rose like frozen bones toward the vaulted ceiling. Cold glittered in the chandeliers, where thousands of crystal shards caught the blue firelight and scattered it over the assembled court like fragments of broken ice. And beneath the suffocating weight of a white designer veil, Aria was shaking so hard she could hear the tiny pearls sewn into the fabric whisper against one another. She was going to die here. That was the only thought left in her head. Not the lines she had been forced to memorize. Not the graceful posture beaten into her over 3 sleepless nights. Not the warnings hissed at her by the Solstice handlers as they cinched her into a gown worth more than every year of her life combined. Stand straight. Speak only when spoken to. Do not look frightened. Do not act like a servant. Do not let him see what you are. As if terror could be hidden beneath silk. As if a maid's hands could become a princess's hands because someone had shoved them into ivory gloves. As if a human girl could stand at the altar of the Alpha King of the North and survive the moment he realized he had been deceived. Aria's breath came too fast. The veil trapped it against her lips, warm and damp, while the rest of her body froze. The gown was a masterpiece of cruelty. Heavy white velvet embroidered with silver thread, its bodice tight enough to make each inhale feel stolen. Its long sleeves hid the old bruises on her arms. Its high collar covered the place where a Solstice guard's fingers had pressed too hard when he warned her what would happen if she ruined the arrangement. Her fingers trembled around the winter roses in her hands. They were real roses somehow. Pale, thornless, preserved by magic in a kingdom where nothing soft should have survived. Around her, the Winterbourne elite waited in terrible silence. There were no murmurs, no coughs, no rustle of polite celebration. Hundreds of wolves stood in rows beneath banners of black and silver, each one dressed in severe luxury, each face composed into something colder than hate. Their eyes glowed faintly in the candlelit gloom. Predators forced into human shape. Executives, warriors, nobles, killers. And every one of them knew the woman at the altar was supposed to be Seraphine Vale, princess of the Solstice Empire. Spoiled, untouchable, wolf-blooded, beautiful in the way expensive knives were beautiful. Aria was only beautiful by accident. That was what the head maid used to say whenever men in the Solstice estate looked too long at her. A pretty face is dangerous when you have no title to protect it. Aria had learned to lower her eyes. She had learned to make her body smaller, to hide the soft curve of her mouth, the gleam of her pale gold hair, the shape that turned heads even under a plain gray uniform. She had learned that beauty without power was not a blessing. It was a target painted on skin. Now that same face was hidden beneath a royal veil, and the people who had used her as a maid had decided her beauty was useful enough to gamble with her life. The real princess had vanished before dawn. No one in the Solstice Empire had panicked for her safety. They had panicked because the marriage treaty could not fail. Winterbourne wanted a bride. The North wanted blood tied to blood. The Solstice Empire wanted peace, protection, and access to Winterbourne's brutal corporate empire. So they had dragged Aria from the laundry room. Same height, similar hair, close enough bone structure beneath a veil, human enough to be disposable, princess enough to be buried quietly if the gamble failed. A distant bell groaned once through the citadel. Aria's heart stopped. The wolves in the hall lowered their heads. The massive iron doors at the far end of the chamber blasted open. Winter came in with him. The candles bent. The blue flames guttered low. A wave of raw, violent power rolled through the hall so intensely Aria nearly dropped the roses. It struck the gathered court first, and the reaction was immediate. Every wolf in the room went to their knees. Not gracefully. Not ceremonially. They collapsed under him. Nobles in immaculate suits and jeweled gowns hit the marble as if an invisible hand had forced them down by the spine. Guards bowed with fists to the floor. Executives from the Winterbourne Conglomerate lowered their heads until their foreheads nearly touched stone. Even the Solstice ambassador, a proud wolf with gold rings on every finger, dropped so quickly his chain of office snapped against his chest. Aria remained standing, only because no one had told her what to do, and because fear had locked her knees. Kaelen Cross strode into the hall. The Alpha King of the North was not merely tall. He was built like punishment given flesh. 6.5 feet of controlled violence, wrapped in a bespoke black suit, his shoulders broad enough to make the vast doorway look narrow behind him. The cut of his jacket did nothing to soften the heavy muscle beneath it. It only emphasized the lethal precision of his body, the disciplined strength of a man who could break bone without raising his voice. His hair was dark, swept back from a face so devastatingly handsome it seemed carved for intimidation rather than admiration. Sharp cheekbones, a hard jaw, a mouth shaped with cruel perfection. His skin was pale beneath the winter light, making his ice-blue eyes appear impossibly vivid. Those eyes did not scan the room. They went straight to her. Aria forgot how to breathe. Every story whispered below stairs returned at once. Kaelen Cross had taken control of the Winterbourne Conglomerate by ripping power from the throats of men twice his age. Kaelen Cross had executed traitors in boardrooms and battlefields with equal calm. Kaelen Cross did not forgive insult, did not tolerate weakness, did not smile unless someone was already bleeding. He was a tyrant, a beast in a tailored suit, the alpha no other alpha challenged twice. And she was standing at his altar, wearing another woman's name. His steps echoed through the hall, slow, measured, final. No music played. No priest dared speak. There was only the sound of his polished shoes against marble, and the pulse hammering so loudly in Aria's ears, she wondered if wolves could hear it. Of course they could. Of course he could. Kaelen came closer, and with each step the pressure of his aura intensified. It pressed against Aria's skin like deep water. It slid beneath the gown, beneath the veil, beneath every lie forced onto her body. Her stomach clenched. Her fingers went numb around the roses. Run! Some ancient part of her begged. But there was nowhere to run. He stopped before her. The top of Aria's head barely reached his chest. From beneath the veil, all she could see at first was the black line of his suit, the snowy white of his shirt, the expensive watch at his wrist, the large hand hanging relaxed at his side. Relaxed, but not soft. Never soft. His fingers were long, powerful, marked with faint scars that looked silver under the blue flames. The hall waited. Aria lowered her head because a princess might have lifted her chin, but a maid knew when death was looking at her. Kaelen said nothing. Seconds stretched. The silence became unbearable. Then he inhaled. It was small, almost imperceptible, the slightest expansion of his broad chest. But Aria felt the change in him, like lightning striking too close. Kaelen went utterly still. Beneath the veil, she squeezed her eyes shut. He knew. He could smell the soap from the servant's wing. The cheap lye soap that never fully left her skin no matter how many oils they had rubbed over her before the ceremony. He could smell the terror, the humanity, the absence of wolf, the absence of royalty. He knew she was not Princess Seraphine. He knew she was no one. Aria's throat tightened until it hurt. Please, she thought wildly. Please do not kill me in front of them. Please make it quick. Please do not make my mother hear about it. Please, please, please. Kaelen inhaled again, this time deeper. His entire expression changed, not in the way Aria expected. There was no rage, no disgust, no flash of insulted pride, no immediate command for guards to seize her, strip away the veil, expose the Solstice deceit before the Northern Court. Instead, something shattered behind his eyes. For one suspended moment, the terrifying Alpha King looked as though the floor had vanished beneath him. Cedar, sunlight, cheap soap. The scent struck Kaelen with such impossible force that his wolf surged against his skin, wild and ravenous, claws scraping at the inside of his control. Not perfume. Not the cloying floral poison of a pampered solstice princess. Not the artificial sweetness of royal oils. Not the sharp chemical bite of political deception. Cedar, like sun-warmed trunks at the edge of a forbidden forest. Sunlight, impossibly bright in the heart of his frozen citadel. And underneath it, plain soap. Servant soap. Human soap. The kind used by hands that scrubbed floors, washed linens, carried trays, survived. His bride was human. His bride was terrified. His bride was his. The truth slammed through him with a force no enemy had ever managed to land. Fated mate. The ancient bond did not whisper. It roared. Kaelen's wolf recognized her before his mind could form the word. The beast inside him, the monster kings and boards and rival alphas feared, dropped to its belly inside his soul and bared its throat to a trembling human girl in a stolen veil. Mine. The word was not thought. It was law. Every instinct he possessed turned toward her at once. Protect, possess, hide, adore, destroy anyone who frightened her. Burn the Solstice Empire down stone by stone for sending her here shaking, starved, and dressed for sacrifice. Kaelen's hand flexed once at his side. Across the hall, several kneeling wolves flinched as his aura darkened. He forced it back, carefully, brutally. He had spent his life mastering violence. Now, for the first time, he used that mastery to make himself gentle. The girl before him had no idea. That was obvious from the way her pulse raced, from the faint tremor in her shoulders, from the delicate scent of panic blooming beneath cedar and sunlight. She thought he was about to execute her. The realization filled him with a cold rage so vast it nearly became calm. Someone had put his mate in fear of him. Someone had made her believe she was disposable. Someone had placed calluses on the hands of a woman born to be cherished by him. Kaelen lowered his gaze to those hands. The gloves were expensive. Ivory silk, solstice embroidery at the wrists. But the fit was wrong. Not by much, but enough for him to notice. The fingers were slightly too long, the palms too tight. And beneath the fine fabric, where most would have seen only a bride's nervous grip on winter roses, Kaelen saw the truth. The faint stiffness of labor. The unconscious care of someone used to hiding pain. The way she held the flowers as if she expected to be scolded for crushing them. Not a princess. Never a princess. Something better. His mouth curved. It was not the smile his enemies knew. It was darker, softer, more dangerous. A secret smile. Aria saw it through the veil and misunderstood completely. Her blood went cold. He smiled like a man who had decided how he wanted her to die. "Your Majesty," the Solstice ambassador stammered from his knees, his voice thin with strain. "The princess stands ready to honor the treaty between our noble houses." Kaelen did not look away from Aria. The ambassador swallowed. "As agreed, the Solstice Empire presents Her Highness Princess Seraphine Vale as bride to the Alpha King of Winterbourne." Aria's stomach turned. Her borrowed name hung in the air like a noose. Kaelen lifted one hand. The ambassador fell silent instantly. Then the Alpha King reached for her. Aria flinched before she could stop herself. It was small, a jerk of her fingers, a tremor through the bouquet. But he saw it. Of course he saw it. Kaelen's hand paused inches from hers. A muscle worked in his jaw. For one heartbeat, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath with him. Then he changed the motion. Slower now, he extended his palm beneath her hand, not grabbing, not seizing, but waiting, offering her the impossible chance to choose. Aria stared down through the blur of lace and silk. His hand was huge compared to hers, strong enough to crush. Warm, she realized with shock, despite the freezing hall. Warm and steady and scarred. She did not want to touch him. She wanted to live. So she placed her trembling hand in his. The moment her fingers met his palm, Kaelen's control nearly snapped. Her glove was thin. Too thin. He could feel the shape of her through it. The smallness of her hand. The tension in her fingers. The roughened places at the base of her palm where silk could not fully hide what life had done to her. Calluses. His beautiful, terrified bride had calluses. His wolf snarled. Kaelen bowed over her hand. The hall rippled with disbelief. Kings did not bow. Alpha kings did not bow. Kaelen Cross certainly did not lower himself before anyone, let alone a solstice bride delivered to him as a political arrangement. But he bent his head, as if before something sacred. Aria's lungs seized when his mouth touched her knuckles. The kiss was light, reverent, devastating. Heat shot through her gloved fingers and up her arm, so suddenly she almost gasped. It was absurd. She was moments away from exposure, surrounded by monsters, held by the most dangerous man alive, and her body chose that instant to notice the softness of his lips, the controlled warmth of his breath, the way his thumb settled over her wrist, exactly above her frantic pulse. He could feel how frightened she was. She knew he could. Kaelen lifted his eyes to hers through the veil. "My noble princess," he said. His voice was deep enough to vibrate through the marble. Aria's heart lurched. There was something in his tone no one else would hear. Something smooth and hidden beneath the formal words. Amusement, maybe. Warning, certainly. But not the kind meant for her. He knew. He knew, and he was not saying it. "Welcome to Winterbourne," Kaelen continued, still holding her hand as though she were precious enough to bruise the world for. "I have waited a very long time for you." A murmur moved through the hall before dying under the pressure of his aura. Aria stared at him, unable to understand why she was still alive. The Solstice ambassador looked almost faint with relief. The Winterbourne court looked stunned, suspicious, furious that their king had offered tenderness where they expected contempt. Kaelen ignored them all. His attention remained fixed on the veiled girl before him. He could smell the confusion blooming through her terror, could hear every frantic beat of her human heart, could see the questions trapped behind the lace. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? When will the punishment come?" Kaelen's thumb brushed once over the inside of her wrist. A promise, though she could not know it yet. No punishment, little bride. Not for you. Never for you. The officiant, an ancient wolf with silver hair and trembling hands, stepped forward because the ceremony had to continue, and no one wished to be the first to question the Alpha King. His voice echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling, speaking of treaties, bloodlines, loyalty, and the binding of realms. Aria heard almost none of it. She heard only Kaelen breathing, felt only his hand holding hers, saw only the impossible fact that he had not let go. He stood beside her now, massive and dark, a wall between her and the court. When she swayed slightly beneath the weight of the gown and veil, his body shifted closer by a fraction. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough that she did. Enough that his heat reached her through the cold. The vows came. She repeated the words she had been forced to memorize. Her voice shook on the first line. Kaelen's fingers tightened gently around hers, not in warning, but in support. Aria almost stumbled over the next phrase, because that frightened her more than cruelty would have. Cruelty made sense. Gentleness from a monster did not. When it was his turn, Kaelen spoke without looking at the officiant, the court, or the Solstice delegation. He looked only at her. "I, Kaelen Cross, Alpha King of the North, Sovereign of Winterbourne, take you as my wife before all powers that witness this hall." His voice lowered, turning rougher, more intimate, until every word seemed meant for her skin alone. "I bind my protection to your breath, my throne to your name, my strength to your safety, and my life to yours." The hall went silent in a new way. Even Aria knew those were not the treaty vows. Those were not political words. Those were mate vows. Ancient ones. Dangerous ones. Her pulse stumbled. Kaelen smiled faintly, as if he had felt the moment her fear made room for shock. The officiant hesitated only once before finishing the rite. "Then, by winter law and witnessed oath, the union is sealed." A blade was presented on a velvet cushion. Black steel. Ceremonial. Beautiful and horrifying. Aria's knees nearly gave out. They had told her there might be blood. A royal wolf bride would offer her palm. The king would offer his. Blood to blood. Realm to realm. But Aria was human. Human blood would reveal everything. The ambassador's face went gray. Kaelen released Aria's hand. For one desperate second, she thought he had finally decided to expose her. Instead, he took the blade and sliced it cleanly across his own palm. Dark blood welled instantly. Before anyone could react, he closed his fist around the wound, letting the blood drip only onto the marble between them. "My blood is sufficient," he said. The officiant paled. "Your Majesty, tradition requires—" Kaelen looked at him. The old wolf stopped speaking. "My blood is sufficient," Kaelen repeated softly. No one argued. Aria's vision blurred. He had protected her. Not by accident. Not because he had missed the truth. He had deliberately changed the ritual to keep her secret. The realization should have comforted her. It did not. It made him more frightening, because a tyrant who knew her secret and spared her life was not merciful. He was making a choice, and choices had reasons. The ceremony ended with no applause, only submission. The court bowed lower. The Solstice delegation exhaled too soon. The Winterbourne wolves stared at their king as though he had become something unfamiliar before their eyes. Kaelen turned toward Aria. "Come," he said. It was not a request. But his hand returned beneath hers, patient again, waiting for her to place her fingers in his grasp. She did, because refusal was impossible. He led her down the altar steps. The hall parted before them. Aria walked beside the Alpha King of the North through a sea of bowed heads, her stolen veil trailing behind her, her heart beating like a trapped bird. Every instinct screamed that she was walking deeper into danger, not away from it. Yet Kaelen's body remained between her and every staring wolf. When the Solstice ambassador moved as if to approach, Kaelen's aura cut across the space like a blade. The man froze mid-step. "My wife is tired," Kaelen said without turning. "No one will speak to her tonight." "My wife." The words hit Aria low in the stomach. Not the princess, not the treaty bride. My wife. The iron doors opened before them, revealing a corridor lined with black stone and silver lanterns. The moment they passed through, the noise of the hall disappeared behind them with a heavy, final boom. Aria was alone with him. Her breath caught. Kaelen stopped. Slowly, he released her hand and turned to face her. Without the court watching, the silence changed. It became closer, more dangerous. The corridor was dim, lit only by blue flame, and the shadows made him seem even larger. He towered over her, all dark suit, hard muscle, and lethal beauty. Aria backed up without meaning to. Her shoulders touched the cold wall. Kaelen's eyes dropped to the movement. He did not follow. That, somehow, made her shake harder. "Please," she whispered, before she could stop herself. His expression shifted. One word, barely sound, but it struck him harder than a blade. "Please what?" he asked. Aria swallowed against the tightness in her throat. The veil still hid most of her face, but she felt naked under his stare. "Please don't hurt me." For a moment, the Alpha King of the North looked almost in pain. Then the darkness returned, but not aimed at her, never at her. He lifted his hand slowly and touched the edge of her veil. Aria went still. "Did they hurt you?" he asked. The question was quiet, too quiet. She knew better than to answer truthfully. Servants survived by protecting the people who harmed them. Servants survived by knowing powerful men did not ask questions because they cared. They asked because answers became weapons. "No," she lied. Kaelen's eyes sharpened. He could hear it. Of course he could hear it. His thumb traced the embroidered edge of the veil, careful not to touch her skin without permission. "You are a terrible liar, little bride." Aria's stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't have a choice. They told me if I refused, they would—" She stopped so abruptly the words hurt. Kaelen went completely still. The temperature in the corridor seemed to plummet. "They would what?" he asked. Aria pressed her lips together. His gaze lowered to her mouth. For one dangerous second, something possessive and hungry flashed through his face. so intense her body reacted before her mind could stop it. Heat curled beneath her fear. Shame followed instantly. This was the man who might decide whether she lived. She should not notice his beauty. She should not notice the width of his shoulders, the clean scent of winter air and dark cedar, the controlled power in every inch of him. She should not wonder what his hands would feel like without gloves between them. Kaelen saw that too. His secret smile returned, faint and devastating. Not mocking. Pleased. As if the tiniest sign of her awareness had given him something he wanted to hoard. Aria's cheeks burned beneath the veil. "I know you are not Seraphine Vale," he said. The world stopped. There it was. The sentence she had been waiting for since the doors opened. Aria's knees buckled. Kaelen caught her before she could fall. One arm wrapped around her waist, firm and immediate, pulling her against the solid heat of his body. The roses slipped from her hand and scattered across the black marble. Aria made a broken sound. His body went rigid at the contact. She felt it. The violent restraint. The way his chest stopped moving. The way his fingers flexed once at her waist and then loosened, as if he were afraid of holding too tightly, afraid of hurting her. Impossible. "Breathe," he ordered, but his voice had changed. It was rough now, almost shaken. "Aria!" Her eyes flew open beneath the veil. He knew her name. Not Seraphine. Aria. The name sounded different in his mouth, less like something shouted across kitchens, less like something scolded in servant halls. He said it like it belonged in a vow. "How?" she whispered. Kaelen looked down at her, his face inches above the veil. "I know everything that belongs to me." The words should have terrified her. They did. But beneath the terror, something else moved. Something warm. Something treacherous. His hand rose again to the veil. This time he paused. "May I?" No one had asked her permission for anything in days. The question struck so deep that Aria could only nod. Kaelen lifted the veil. Cold air touched her face. Then his eyes saw her clearly. Aria knew what men saw when they looked at her. She had spent years enduring it. Hunger, calculation, amusement, sometimes pity, often entitlement. Kaelen looked at her, as though the frozen world had finally given him fire. Her pale gold hair had loosened from its royal pins, soft strands framing her face. Her skin was fair from years indoors, her lips parted with fear, her wide eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. The gown made her look like a princess from a cruel dream, but the fear made her human, and the stubborn lift of her chin made her more regal than the woman she had been forced to impersonate. Kaelen's control frayed. Beautiful was too small a word. Sexy was too shallow. She was ruin. She was salvation. She was his mate standing in front of him, believing herself doomed, when every kingdom he owned had just become a tool for her comfort. "My God," he said softly. Aria flinched at the intensity in his voice. "Are you going to kill me?" Kaelen's expression hardened. "No." "Are you going to send me back?" His eyes turned glacial. "No." That answer frightened her more. "Then what are you going to do with me?" Kaelen stepped closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she chose. She did not. His hand came up, not to grab her, not to command, but to brush one fallen strand of hair back from her cheek. The touch was so gentle it made her chest ache. "I am going to keep you," he said. Aria's breath caught. His thumb hovered near her cheek, close enough for warmth, not quite touching again. "And I am going to make everyone who thought they could throw you into my hall like a sacrifice regret the first breath they ever took." The words were monstrous. The voice was tender. Aria could not reconcile them. Behind the iron doors, the Winterbourne court waited for their king and queen to reappear. Somewhere far to the south, the Solstice Empire believed it had successfully hidden a scandal beneath a servant girl's veil. Everyone thought the game had begun when the fake princess reached the altar. They were wrong. The game had begun the moment Kaelen Cross inhaled cedar, sunlight, and cheap soap. and the North had already chosen its queen. Aria Blake discovered on her first morning as Queen of Winterbourne that pretending to be a princess was much harder than surviving as a maid. A maid could disappear. A maid could move quietly along walls, memorize footsteps, lower her eyes before powerful people noticed her, and become useful enough that no one questioned why she was still breathing. A princess could not disappear. A princess woke in a bedroom large enough to swallow the entire servants' wing of the Solstice estate. She opened her eyes beneath a ceiling painted with silver constellations and realized she was lying in the center of a bed so enormous it felt less like furniture and more like a private country. Black velvet curtains framed the windows. Frost climbed the glass in elegant white veins. A fireplace taller than any door she had ever scrubbed burned with blue flame, pouring heat across fur rugs so soft she was afraid to step on them. For 5 heartbeats, Aria did not move. Then memory returned. The altar, the veil, the iron doors, Kaelen Cross inhaling as if her scent had struck him through the chest. His voice in the corridor. "I am going to keep you." Aria sat upright so fast the silk sheets slid down her body and immediately regretted it. The nightgown someone had dressed her in was pale silver, almost weightless, held over her shoulders by narrow straps and cut low enough that she clutched the bedding to her chest before remembering no one was in the room. No one except the Alpha King of the North. He was seated in a leather chair near the fire, fully dressed, completely still, watching her. Aria stopped breathing. Kaelen Cross looked like a nightmare waiting politely for permission to begin. His dark suit was immaculate despite the early hour, his broad shoulders filling the chair, one ankle resting casually over the opposite knee. In one large hand he held a crystal glass of dark coffee. In the other he held a folded report, though his ice-blue eyes were not on the paper. They were on her. "Good morning, wife," he said. The word wife slipped through the room and wrapped around her throat. Aria stared at him, clutching the sheets higher. "Good morning, Your Majesty." His gaze dropped briefly to her white-knuckled fingers. A faint smile touched his mouth. "Kaelen," he corrected. She swallowed. "Good morning, Kaelen." His expression softened in a way that made no sense on such a hard face. "Better." Aria had no idea what to do with that. A princess would likely demand breakfast. A princess might complain about the temperature, the bedding, the view, the servants, the quality of the air itself. Princess Seraphine Vale, according to the nervous Solstice tutor who had spent one frantic afternoon coaching Aria before the wedding, never said thank you. She never apologized. She never appeared uncertain. She expected every room to reshape itself around her discomfort. Aria tried to imagine doing that while Kaelen Cross watched her from beside the fire. Her stomach twisted. "I require breakfast," she said. It came out like a question. Kaelen's smile deepened. "Do you?" Aria's cheeks burned. "Yes, obviously, because I am royal." Silence. His eyes gleamed. She wanted to crawl under the bed and die quietly. Instead, Kaelen set down his coffee and rose. The movement was so fluid, so powerful, that her body reacted before her mind could stop it. She flinched backward against the pillows. He saw. Of course he saw. He always saw. But instead of approaching, he turned toward the door and opened it himself. No bell, no command, no sharp bark to summon staff. The Alpha King of the North opened a door like a footman because his fake bride had announced, with all the authority of a frightened kitten, that she required breakfast. 2 maids and a butler waited outside as if they had been frozen in place all night. "My wife requires breakfast," Kaelen said. The servants bowed so quickly Aria feared they might hurt themselves. "Immediately, Your Majesty," the butler said. Kaelen's voice lowered. "And the Citadel will remember that when the Queen requires something, she does not wait." The air changed. The servants went pale. Aria went paler. She had not meant that. She had not meant anyone should be threatened because she had failed to sound like a princess correctly. Yes, Your Majesty, the butler whispered. The door closed. Aria stared at Kaelen in horror. He returned to the chair, perfectly composed. Very good, little bride. That was good? For a first attempt. Her mouth opened, then closed. He knew she was attempting it. He knew she was trying to imitate a haughty Solstice princess. He knew, and he was sitting there looking entertained. Aria pulled the sheet up to her chin. Are you laughing at me? No. You look like you are. I am admiring you. That was worse. Much worse. Breakfast arrived 6 minutes later. Not a tray. A procession. Servants carried in silver stands of pastries, fruit preserved under crystal domes, steaming dishes of eggs, roasted meats, winter berries, spiced breads, honey, butter sculpted into roses, cream, tea, coffee, and a porcelain bowl of sugared pears that looked too beautiful to eat. The meal covered an entire table, dragged in by 4 footmen. Aria stared at it until her stomach cramped with hunger. She had eaten half a roll the day before the wedding. Before that, soup from the servant's pot. Before that, she could not remember. Fear made hunger strange. It sharpened it and numbed it at the same time. The servants waited. Kaelen watched. Aria remembered she was supposed to be arrogant. She lifted her chin. This is acceptable. One footman looked as if he might faint with relief. Kaelen's mouth twitched. Aria chose the smallest pastry on the table and took a delicate bite. Sugar and butter melted on her tongue. Her eyes nearly closed from pleasure before she forced herself to remain composed. Princesses did not weep over breakfast. Princesses did not eat like starving girls. Princesses did not glance toward the door and calculate whether they could hide leftovers in napkins. Kaelen saw that too. By noon, 3 additional meals had been scheduled into her day. By evening, every corridor she passed through contained bowls of sugared fruit, covered silver plates, and nervous staff members offering warm bread. By midnight, Aria had eaten less in public than a bird and was starving again. Old habits were stronger than silk. The citadel slept like a beast with one eye open. Aria waited until the fire had burned low, and the guards outside her door changed shifts. She had learned timing as a maid. She had learned which hinges complained, which floors betrayed weight, which servants were cruel and which were only tired. The Queen's suite had 3 rooms, 2 dressing chambers, a private bath of black stone and white marble, and 1 discreet servant's passage hidden behind a carved panel near the wardrobe. Aria found it in under 10 minutes. That, at least, still made sense. She wrapped a robe around the indecent nightgown, slipped through the panel, and followed the narrow stone passage down into the warm underbelly of Winterbourne Citadel. There, finally, she could breathe. The kitchens smelled of yeast, smoke, cream, herbs, and roasted meat. Copper pots hung from iron hooks. Long wooden tables had been scrubbed until they shone. The enormous hearths were banked, but not dead, pulsing orange in the dark. Aria moved like a ghost. She found day-old bread beneath a cloth, a wedge of cheese, and a bowl of cold stew left near the wash station. She knew exactly what food was safe to steal because it had been set aside for staff, not counted for nobles. She knew how to cut a slice without changing the shape of the loaf. She knew how to eat quickly and quietly over the sink so crumbs did not fall. The first bite of cold stew nearly made her knees weaken. She leaned over the counter, spoon in hand, eyes burning. She was alive. She was not in chains. She was not dead on the altar. She was not back in the Solstice estate. She was in the kitchens of Winterbourne Citadel, wearing a robe worth more than the kitchen itself, eating leftovers like the maid she still was. A light snapped on. Aria froze. 6 kitchen workers stared at her. The head chef, a broad man with a curled mustache and a face already turning purple with alarm, dropped the copper pan in his hands. The crash echoed like a gunshot. "Your Majesty," he gasped. Aria's spoon fell into the sink. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then everyone started bowing at once. "No," Aria whispered. "Please, please don't. I was only—" The kitchen door opened. Kaelen stood there. barefoot, shirt untucked, dark hair slightly mussed. Still more terrifying than any armed army could have been. The entire kitchen seemed to shrink around him. Aria's soul left her body. He had found her. Of course he had found her. Maybe he had followed her scent. Maybe he had never been asleep. Maybe Alpha Kings simply knew when false queens stole stew in the dark. His eyes moved over the scene. The robe hanging loose on her shoulders, the spoon in the sink, the cold stew, the bread, the terror on every servant's face. Then his gaze settled on the chef. The temperature dropped. "Explain," Kaelen said. The chef opened and closed his mouth. "Your Majesty, I did not know Her Majesty was here. I would never permit the Queen to be unattended in the kitchens. I apologize for the impropriety. It will not happen again." Aria stepped forward. "It wasn't his fault." Kaelen did not look at her. That frightened her most. "Was my wife fed today?" he asked. The chef blinked. "Yes, Your Majesty. We sent breakfast, luncheon, tea, dinner, evening chocolate, and—" "Then why?" Kaelen said softly. "Is she standing in my kitchen at midnight, eating cold scraps?" No one breathed. Aria's face burned. "I wasn't hungry earlier." Kaelen looked at the bowl, then at her. His expression was unreadable, but something dark and wounded moved through his eyes. "You were hungry," he said. "You were afraid to eat." The words slipped under her skin. Because they were true. Because he knew. Because everyone was looking. The chef began to tremble. "Your Majesty, I swear on my life, no disrespect was intended. If Her Majesty found the meal lacking—" "Fired," Kaelen said. Aria gasped. "No!" The chef went white. Kaelen's gaze remained lethal. "You allowed the Queen of Winterbourne to go hungry under my roof." "No!" Aria said again, louder this time. She moved before she could think, stepping between the chef and the Alpha King. Every servant in the kitchen made a strangled sound, as if she had thrown herself in front of a moving blade. Kaelen's eyes dropped to her. She should have backed down. A maid would have. A princess would not. Aria lifted her chin and tried desperately to sound arrogant. "I forbid it." The kitchen went silent. Kaelen looked at her for one long moment. Then something like delight flickered behind his eyes. "You forbid it?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice shook. "I am the Queen, apparently." His mouth curved. "Apparently. And I say he stays." The chef looked ready to collapse from gratitude or terror. Kaelen stepped closer, until Aria had to tilt her head back to keep looking at him. He was huge in the kitchen, all bare forearms, hard muscle, and silent dominance. The robe suddenly felt thin. The floor suddenly felt cold beneath her feet. "What then?" he asked. "Is his punishment?" Aria hesitated. The chef made a tiny wounded noise. "There is no punishment." Kaelen's brows lifted. "I mean," she corrected quickly, remembering that princesses probably enjoyed punishments. "His punishment is that he must make better bread, warmer bread, for everyone." "For everyone," Kaelen repeated. She nodded too fast. "Yes, for the staff too." His eyes softened so suddenly she almost lost her nerve. Then he turned back to the chef. "You heard your queen. You will remain employed because she is merciful. You will bake fresh bread for every servant in the citadel before dawn." His voice became colder. "And if I learn anyone under my roof is too afraid, too busy, or too neglected to eat, I will remove the entire management structure of this household and rebuild it from ash." The servants bowed so low they nearly touched the floor. Aria stared at him in disbelief. He had turned her midnight theft into royal policy. Kaelen looked at the copper pots hanging above them. "Also," he added, "replace every piece of cookware in this kitchen." The chef choked. "Your Majesty?" "With gold." Aria's head snapped toward him. "Gold?" "Solid gold." The chef looked as though his soul had briefly separated from his body. Kaelen's expression remained perfectly grave. "Clearly ordinary cookware has failed to produce meals worthy of my wife." "That is not how cooking works," Aria blurted. Every servant stared at her. Kaelen's smile was slow and private. Then you will supervise the replacement, little bride. I will not. You forbid that as well? Yes. His gaze lowered to her mouth. For one heated second, the kitchen, the servants, the chef, the cold stew, all of it disappeared. Then he inclined his head. As my queen commands. Aria had no idea whether she had won. She suspected she had somehow lost. The next morning, the cookware was not replaced with solid gold, only the handles. Aria discovered this when the chef personally presented her with a basket of warm bread and a look of religious devotion. By afternoon, the rumor had spread through the citadel that the Queen of Winterbourne had descended into the kitchens at midnight to inspect servant meals and had personally saved the head chef from execution. By evening, 3 laundresses cried when Aria passed them. By the next day, every servant in the citadel bowed to her not with terror, but with something perilously close to loyalty. Aria did not know what to do with loyalty. She could barely manage shoes. The heels were a disaster. Princess Seraphine's wardrobe had been sent from the Solstice Empire in lacquered trunks large enough to hide bodies in. Every gown was a weapon. Every corset was a trap. Every pair of shoes seemed designed by someone who hated feet and balance equally. Aria had spent her life in flat servant shoes. She could carry a full tray through a crowded dining room without spilling a drop. She could climb service stairs in the dark. She could kneel, scrub, run, dodge, and stand for 14 hours straight. But she could not walk across Winterbourne Citadel in jeweled heels. On the 3rd day, Kaelen escorted her through the Eastern Gallery to meet a delegation of Northern executives. It was meant to be simple. Walk beside him. Look bored. Say nothing unless necessary. Appear expensive and cruel. Aria tried. She truly tried. She wore a sapphire gown that hugged her figure in a way that made servants glance away and made Kaelen's jaw tighten every time he looked at her. Her pale gold hair was pinned high beneath a silver comb. Her lips had been painted a soft red. Her heels glittered beneath the hem of the gown like tiny instruments of death. Remember, Kaelen murmured as they approached the gallery doors, you need not impress them. Aria whispered back, princesses impress everyone. Do they? I don't know. I assume. His mouth twitched. She narrowed her eyes. Stop enjoying this. I have never enjoyed anything more. That startled her so much that she missed the slight rise in the marble floor. Her heel caught. The world tilted. Aria made a small, undignified sound and pitched forward directly in front of 6 executives, 4 guards, and an elderly female wolf wearing diamonds the size of winter plums. She did not hit the floor. Kaelen caught her, not by the arm, not by the waist. He swept her fully into his arms, as if she weighed nothing at all. One moment she was falling. The next, she was pressed against his chest, her legs draped over one massive forearm, one of his hands secure at her back. Heat flooded her face. Her hands landed against his shoulders, and beneath the flawless suit she felt the impossible hardness of him. The gallery went silent. Aria stared up at him, mortified. Put me down, she hissed. Kaelen looked murderous, not at her, at the floor. Who approved this marble? He asked. No one answered. Kaelen, Aria whispered. It was my shoe. His eyes cut to the nearest guard. Summon the steward. The guard sprinted. Please don't execute the floor, she whispered. That was a mistake. His gaze returned to her, and the corner of his mouth lifted. For you, I will show mercy. The steward arrived breathless and nearly died on sight. Kaelen continued holding Aria, as if she were a royal decree and not a humiliated human woman trying to hide her face against his shoulder. My wife has been endangered, Kaelen said. The steward went gray. Endangered, Your Majesty? This floor is too hard. Aria closed her eyes. The entire citadel will be covered in rugs. The steward blinked. The entire citadel? Every corridor, every gallery, every stair landing, every room she enters. With rugs, the steward repeated faintly. Priceless ones, Kaelen said. Antique, hand-woven, thick enough that if my queen falls, the floor apologizes. The elderly diamond-covered wolf looked down at the marble as if expecting it to begin apologizing immediately. Aria dug her fingers into Kaelen's jacket. I am begging you to stop talking. His eyes warmed. Are you? Yes. In front of my court? She remembered too late. Princesses did not beg. She lifted her chin from his shoulder. I mean, I command you to stop talking. The executive stared. Kaelen's smile turned openly pleased. As my queen commands. Then he carried her past all of them. Not 2 steps to a chair. Not to a private alcove. Not somewhere reasonable. He carried her through the entire eastern gallery, down a grand staircase, across the central hall, and into the private wing while servants, guards, executives, and nobles dropped to their knees in waves. Aria kept her face turned toward his neck, because dying seemed less embarrassing. You can put me down now, she muttered. No, I am not injured. You might be. I am not. My physician will decide. Your physician will find that I tripped. Then he will diagnose the shoes. Despite herself, a laugh escaped her. It was small, breathless, shocked out of her before fear could stop it. Kaelen went very still. Aria felt it through every point where her body touched his. What? She whispered. Nothing. But his voice had changed. It was lower, rougher. He had heard her laugh and reacted as if she had given him a kingdom. Aria did not laugh again. She was afraid of what he might buy, fire, destroy, or carpet if she did. By sunset, workers had unlocked the ancient Winterbourne vaults, hauling up centuries of hoarded treasure and begun unrolling priceless antique rugs across the citadel. By nightfall, Aria's sitting room was so thickly layered with priceless woven masterpieces that walking through it felt like crossing a meadow of stolen history. By the next morning, Kaelen had forbidden her heels. I cannot attend court barefoot, Aria said. You can attend court carried. I absolutely cannot. You can. I will look ridiculous. You will look adored. That silenced her. He said it as if it were obvious. As if being adored by the most feared tyrant in the north were an ordinary condition, like weather. Aria spent the rest of the day trying to be cruel enough to balance it. She dismissed a maid from dressing her because the woman's hands were shaking too badly, then immediately ran after her into the hall and apologized. She insulted a floral arrangement by calling it too cheerful, then felt guilty and rearranged the flowers herself. She attempted to give a cold royal command at luncheon, forgot the word for decanter, and accidentally asked a footman to, please pass the shiny water thing. Kaelen watched every failure with the focused devotion of a man studying scripture. When anyone looked confused, he made them regret it with one glance. When anyone looked amused, he smiled until they remembered fear. When Aria forgot protocol, he declared the protocol outdated. When Aria used the wrong fork, he used the same one, and made the entire table follow. When Aria thanked a servant and then went pale at her own mistake, Kaelen lifted his glass and said, The Queen's gratitude is now a formal honor. Anyone who receives it may consider themselves distinguished. By dinner, every servant in the room was silently hoping to be thanked. Aria did not understand him. That was the worst part. Cruelty had rules. Fear had patterns. Even hunger had a logic. But Kaelen Cross was dismantling the world around her mistake by mistake, covering every crack in her disguise with power so absolute no one dared question it. He knew she was fake. He knew she was human. He knew she was a maid. And every time she failed, he acted as if the failure proved she was more royal than any princess born. Aria lay on the left edge of the mattress, stiff as a corpse beneath black silk sheets, wearing another pale nightgown chosen by someone with no understanding of modesty. Her hair spilled loose over the pillow. Her hands were folded over her stomach, her eyes fixed on the canopy above. Kaelen was in the dressing room. She could hear him moving, the soft slide of fabric, the muted clink of cufflinks against a tray, the quiet footfalls of a predator undressing. Her heart beat faster with every sound. He had not touched her cruelly. He had not forced anything from her. He had not even kissed her mouth. And that made her fear worse, not better, because she did not know what he was waiting for. The beast always waited in stories. Then it devoured. The dressing room door opened. Aria stopped breathing. Kaelen emerged wearing only dark sleeping pants. Her mind went blank. She had known he was large. She had felt his strength when he carried her. But seeing him without the armor of his suit was something else entirely. His chest was broad and heavily muscled, marked with faint scars that silvered across pale skin. His shoulders looked carved from war. His arms were thick with restrained power. Every movement revealed strength disciplined into elegance. He was beautiful, terrifyingly, unfairly beautiful. Aria looked away so fast her neck hurt. Kaelen noticed. Of course he noticed. The bed dipped under his weight. Aria's fingers tightened in the sheets. He did not grab her, did not loom over her, did not make some dark claim in the language of wolves and kings. He simply lay down behind her. The silence stretched. Then one massive arm slid around her waist. Aria went rigid. Kaelen paused. His voice brushed the back of her neck. Breathe, little bride. I am breathing. No. You are preparing for execution. That is not funny. I know. His arm tightened slightly, drawing her back until her body met the hard warmth of his. Aria's entire world narrowed to the contact, his chest against her spine, his thighs behind hers, his breath near her hair, the sheer size of him surrounding her like a wall. She waited for violence. Instead, Kaelen buried his face in the curve of her neck. Aria's eyes flew open. He inhaled, slowly, deeply. A shudder moved through his body. Not weakness, not cold, something else. Something he was restraining with terrifying effort. Her pulse became frantic beneath the skin of her throat. Kaelen smiled against her neck. She felt it. The beast was amused. Your heart is very loud, he murmured. I can't help that. I know. Are you going to kill me? No. You keep saying that, and you keep asking. Because I don't believe you, she almost said. But his arm was warm, and his hand rested open over her stomach, not gripping, not claiming in any way she could protest. His thumb moved once, barely there, a slow stroke meant to soothe. It did not soothe. It made her feel too much. You should sleep, he said. How can I sleep like this? Comfortably. She turned her head enough to glare at him over her shoulder. You are crushing me. He immediately loosened his arm. The loss of pressure startled her. So did the fact that he had obeyed. I did not mean let go, she whispered before she could stop herself. Kaelen went still. Heat flooded her face. I mean, she said quickly, I meant you were not actually crushing me. His mouth curved near her skin. As my queen clarifies. You are impossible. You are pretending to be arrogant again. I am trying. I know. Aria closed her eyes. His face remained tucked against her neck. His breath moved slowly over her skin. Every few moments, he inhaled as if her scent was something he needed more than sleep. It should have frightened her. It did frighten her, but beneath the fear, exhaustion pulled at her bones. No one had ever held her like this. Not like property. Not like a servant dragged where she did not wish to go. Like something guarded. Like something treasured. Kaelen listened as her heartbeat began, little by little, to slow. He did not sleep. He did not want to waste a second of her. In the darkness, with cedar and sunlight filling his lungs, Kaelen Cross held the trembling human woman who still believed she was fooling him, and felt a savage tenderness so deep it bordered on madness. She thought she was clumsy. She thought she was failing. She thought the disguise was the reason he kept her. His poor little bride had no idea. He had watched empires crawl. He had broken rival alphas, absorbed hostile companies, turned betrayals into public executions and private ruin. He had been called beast, tyrant, butcher, king. He had earned every name. And yet one human maid in a stolen princess gown had undone him by eating cold stew in his kitchen and tripping over her own shoes. His wolf was obsessed. He was worse. He wanted to feed her until hunger became a memory. He wanted to cover every floor so the world softened beneath her steps. He wanted to burn every hand that had bruised her, bankrupt every house that had neglected her, and crown her so high no one from the Solstice Empire could look at her without going blind. But for now, she needed sleep. So the Alpha King of the North held himself still. He kept his claws buried, kept his hunger leashed, kept his mouth away from the pulse fluttering beneath her soft skin, though every instinct in him demanded he mark, claim, protect, announce. Not yet. Not until she looked at him without flinching. Not until she knew that beast did not mean enemy. Aria shifted in her sleep, unconsciously pressing closer to his heat. Kaelen's eyes closed. A silent, helpless smile touched his mouth. "How long?" he whispered into the dark. "Are you going to keep pretending, little queen?" She answered only with a sleepy breath and the soft beat of a human heart that had already become the center of his ruthless world. Kaelen held her until dawn. Outside the bedroom, servants crossed new rugs laid over ancient marble. In the kitchens, bread rose for every worker in the citadel. In the galleries, executives whispered about a queen who could command mercy from a tyrant and survive. And far beyond the frozen walls of Winterbourne, the Solstice Empire continued to believe its deception remained under control. Inside the massive bed, Aria slept in the arms of the monster she feared. And the monster loved her so violently that the entire North was beginning to change shape around her dreams. By the 3rd month of her marriage, Aria Blake had learned that Winterbourne Citadel could transform from a fortress into a palace without becoming any less terrifying. The black marble floors had been polished until they reflected the chandeliers like frozen lakes. Silver lanterns burned along the walls in hundreds of blue-white flames. Garlands of winter roses climbed the ribbed stone columns, their pale petals glittering with enchanted frost. Crystal tables floated with trays of champagne, sugared berries, and delicate pastries shaped like snowflakes, while a string orchestra played from a balcony carved into the far wall. Every door stood open. Every guard wore ceremonial black. Every wolf in the north had arrived dressed like wealth sharpened into a weapon. And every guest, without exception, looked at Aria. She stood at the top of the grand staircase beside Kaelen Cross, trying not to tremble beneath the winter crown. The crown was heavier than it looked. It was made of black diamonds and silver branches, each delicate point shaped like ice caught mid-growth. It had been placed in her pale gold hair by 3 ancient attendants who spoke in whispers and bowed as if touching her might start a war. Aria had almost begged them to stop. Queens did not beg. So she had stood there in silence while the crown settled onto her head, like proof of a lie. Her gown had been made for the gala by Winterbourne's private atelier, and even now she did not know how to move in it without feeling exposed and worshipped at the same time. The fabric was deep midnight blue, fitted through the bodice and waist before spilling into a sweeping skirt embroidered with silver frost. The neckline curved low across her chest with elegant, dangerous confidence, leaving her shoulders bare except for translucent sleeves that shimmered like ice mist. Tiny crystals caught the light whenever she breathed. She looked, according to the maids who had seen her, breathtaking. She felt like a candle standing in a room full of wolves. At her side, Kaelen looked as though he had been born from the darkest corner of winter itself. He wore a black formal suit, cut perfectly over his massive frame, the fabric severe and expensive. The shirt beneath opened just enough at the throat to make every woman in the room glance once, and then look away before he noticed. His dark hair was swept back. His sharp face was calm. His ice blue eyes missed nothing. He was devastatingly handsome. Even after 3 months, that still startled her. The world had called him beast for so long that Aria had expected the word to mean ugly, cruel, twisted, something monstrous to look upon. Instead, Kaelen Cross was the kind of beautiful that hurt to witness. Hard jaw, broad shoulders, heavy muscle, a mouth too sensual for a tyrant, and eyes that could make a room full of predators remember they were prey. He leaned slightly toward her without looking away from the ballroom below. "Your heartbeat is loud again," he murmured. Aria's fingers tightened around the crystal banister. "There are too many people." "There are fewer than I allowed." She glanced at him. "Allowed? I rejected half the guest list." "Why?" "Because you dislike crowded rooms." She blinked. He said it plainly, as if reducing one of the most important corporate galas in Winterbourne history to spare her nerves was ordinary housekeeping. "Kaelen," she whispered, "this gala is for the treaty renewal. It is for investors, rivals, and Solstice parasites to pretend they matter. You cannot call them parasites during the reception. I can. You should not." His gaze slid to her. "As my queen commands." Heat climbed her neck. She still had not grown used to that. His queen. At first, she had thought he used the phrase as a private joke, a reminder that he knew she was false, a cruel little game that only he understood. But the game had not ended. It had expanded. Every mistake she made became law. Every fear she showed became policy. Every servant she thanked became untouchable. The citadel had softened in visible, impossible ways around her. Rugs covered the marble floors. Food was available in every wing. Staff no longer worked until their hands bled. The kitchens baked warm bread before dawn because the queen liked the smell, because Aria liked the smell. And Kaelen, ruthless alpha king, corporate tyrant, feared ruler of the north, watched every change with possessive satisfaction, as if the world becoming gentler for her was not mercy, as if it was conquest. The orchestra swelled. A butler's voice carried across the hall. "Representatives of the Solstice Empire." Aria's body went cold. The doors opened. Gold entered the room. The Solstice delegation moved, as if the light belonged to them. Men and women dressed in warm metallic silks and cream-colored formal wear descended into the ballroom with practiced smiles, every gesture polished by generations of entitlement. Their jewelry flashed like captured sun. Their perfume rolled into the room, sweet and expensive and suffocating. Aria recognized some of them. Not because they knew her, because she had served them. She remembered pouring wine for the ambassador with gold rings on every finger. She remembered scrubbing mud from the hem of Lady Marrow's traveling cloak, while the woman complained that human servants breathed too loudly. She remembered standing beside dining room walls while Solstice nobles discussed maids as if they were furniture that occasionally made inconvenient sounds. Her knees weakened. Kaelen's hand settled at the small of her back. Warm. Steady. Possessive. No one else could see his fingers through the fall of her gown, but Aria felt the silent command in the touch. "Stunt. Breathe. I have you." The Solstice ambassador bowed deeply when he reached the base of the stairs. "Your Majesties, Winterbourne honors us with such a magnificent welcome." Kaelen did not answer immediately. Silence stretched long enough for the ambassador's smile to tremble. Then Kaelen said, "Does it?" Aria pressed her lips together. This was going to be a long night. The receiving line began. Executives bowed. Nobles bent over her hand. Solstice representatives offered compliments sharp enough to cut. Aria played the role she had learned by failing for 3 months. Chin lifted, shoulders relaxed, smile faint, speak little. Let Kaelen's presence do the violence. "You look radiant, Your Majesty," one Solstice woman said, eyes flicking over the winter crown with thinly concealed resentment. Aria inclined her head. "Animal, the North has been kind to me." Kaelen's fingers tightened at her back, not in warning, in pleasure. He liked when she called the North kind. He liked it too much. A young Solstice lord took her gloved hand and bowed lower than necessary. His eyes lingered at her neckline, then rose with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Marriage suits you, Princess Seraphine," he said. "You were always lovely, of course, but Winterbourne has made you truly unforgettable." Aria's stomach clenched. Princess Seraphine. The name still struck like a slap. Before she could answer, Kaelen stepped closer. The air around them darkened. The young lord's smile died. "You will address her as Queen Aria," Kaelen said. The lord went white. Aria's heart stopped. The ambassador's head snapped up. Several Solstice guests exchanged startled glances. Kaelen's expression remained calm. "She is my wife before she is anything your empire sent me." For one breath, Aria could not move. Queen Aria. Not Seraphine. Not princess. Not the lie. Her own name, spoken in front of the people who had erased it. The young lord bowed so fast he nearly stumbled. "Forgive me, your majesty. Queen Aria." Aria felt the entire Solstice delegation looking at her. A cold thread of panic slipped around her ribs. Had Kaelen gone too far? Had he made them suspicious? Had someone recognized her? She kept her face still because 3 months beside him had taught her that stillness could pass for confidence. But inside, she was unraveling. Then the music changed, and Aria saw her. At first, the woman near the doorway seemed like one more Solstice noble among many. She wore a gown of pale gold that clung to her body like liquid sunlight, jewels glittering at her throat and wrists. Her hair was a rich, gleaming blonde, styled in perfect waves. Her face was beautiful in a cold, polished way, the kind of beauty maintained by mirrors, servants, and certainty. Then she turned. Aria's breath caught. Seraphine Vale. The real Solstice princess stood in Winterbourne's ballroom with a champagne glass in her hand and murder in her eyes. 3 months disappeared. Aria was back in the dressing chamber before the wedding, forced to kneel while Solstice women shoved pins into her hair and tightened a royal corset around her ribs. She heard Seraphine's voice again, lazy and cruel, from behind a dressing screen. "Let the maid do it. If the beast kills her, we lose nothing." Aria's fingers went numb. Kaelen felt the change instantly. His head angled toward her. "Who frightened you?" She could not answer. Seraphine was staring directly at them. Not at Aria, at first. At Kaelen. The real princess's expression shifted in invisible stages. Impatience became surprise. Surprise became hunger. Hunger became disbelief. She had expected a beast. Aria saw that clearly. Kaelen Cross was notoriously secretive, ruthlessly purging any images of himself from global media. This had allowed Solstice propaganda to paint him as a scarred, deformed monster to keep their citizens terrified of the North. Seraphine had believed her own empire's lies. That was why she had fled. That was why she had shoved a human maid into her wedding gown and disappeared until the treaty was secured. Now she was looking at Kaelen Cross in his black suit, all devastating beauty and overwhelming power, his massive body positioned protectively beside the woman he called queen. And jealousy consumed her so quickly it seemed to change the air around her. Her gaze dropped to Aria's crown, then to Kaelen's hand at Aria's back, then to the way every Winterbourne wolf bowed their head when Aria passed. The real princess's mouth tightened. Aria knew that look. She had seen it when a servant spilled wine, when a seamstress made a sleeve too tight. When someone lower born received even a crumb of comfort Seraphine believed belonged to her. This was not anger. This was entitlement finding an injury. The ballroom blurred at the edges. "Kaelen," Aria whispered. He looked down at her, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression turn lethal. "Tell me," he said softly. But the orchestra swelled, and the ambassador approached again, forcing conversation, forcing ceremony, forcing Aria to stand beneath the winter crown while the woman whose life she had stolen watched from across the room. Dinner began. Speeches followed. Kaelen sat at the head of the long banquet table, with Aria at his right. The seating arrangement had caused visible distress among the Solstice delegation, because traditionally the contracted bride would sit lower until formally acknowledged by both realms. Kaelen had solved the dispute by removing every chair between Aria and himself. No one argued after that. Aria barely tasted the food. She felt Seraphine's stare through every course. By the time the gala moved from banquet to dancing, Aria's nerves had worn thin enough to snap. The ballroom reopened in full splendor. Blue firelight glittered against crystal. Wolves danced in sweeping circles beneath the chandeliers. Solstice nobles smiled with sharpened teeth. Winterbourne executives watched everything with predatory silence. Kaelen held out his hand. "Dance with me." Aria glanced at the floor. Rugs covered even the ballroom now, layered in deep midnight and silver. "I won't trip? If you do, I will carry you." That is not reassuring. It should be. Despite the fear crawling under her skin, Aria placed her hand in his. The orchestra softened into a waltz. Kaelen drew her into motion. Dancing with him should have been impossible. He was too large, too powerful, too overwhelming, but he guided her with effortless control, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, his body moving with such disciplined grace that Aria forgot, for a few dangerous moments, that the room existed. "You are shaking," he said. "I know. Look at me." "I can't." "You can." Her eyes lifted. Mistake. The full force of him struck her at close range. Ice blue eyes, sharp mouth, the scent of winter cedar, the heat of his hand through her gown. For months she had slept beside him and still never understood how a man could look at her as if she were the only living thing in a dead world. He had not taken from her. He had only waited, held her, fed her, protected her, tormented the citadel with absurd declarations about her comfort, smiled when she forgot to be cruel, listened to her heartbeat at night as if it were music. That made the guilt worse, because the lie had not ended. And across the ballroom, Seraphine Vale was watching it rot open. "She is here," Aria whispered. Kaelen's gaze did not move. "I know." Aria stumbled. He caught her closer before anyone could see. "You know?" "Yes. For how long?" "Since she entered." Aria's pulse slammed. "And you didn't say anything?" "I was waiting to see what she wanted." "She wants you." His expression changed. For one instant, something savage and satisfied passed through his eyes. "Does that bother you?" Aria's mouth went dry. "It terrifies me." "That was not my question." She looked away. His hand tightened at her waist, not enough to hurt, only enough to remind her she was held. Before he could speak again, the music stopped. Not faded, stopped. A jagged silence cut through the ballroom. The dancers froze. The orchestra lowered their instruments one by one. Aria turned. Seraphine Vale stood in the center of the ballroom. Her champagne glass lay shattered at her feet, golden liquid spreading across the rug like spilled sunlight. Her chest rose and fell. Her polished smile was gone, replaced by raw fury so bright it stripped the beauty from her face. Every eye turned toward her. The Solstice ambassador took one horrified step forward. "Princess!" "Do not!" Seraphine snapped. The word cracked through the ballroom. Aria's blood turned to ice. Kaelen did not move. His hand remained at her waist, but the temperature dropped. Seraphine lifted one trembling finger and pointed directly at Aria. "That woman is a fraud!" The room went utterly still. Aria felt the sentence hit her body before her mind could form meaning. A fraud. The words seemed to echo from the marble, the chandeliers, the vaulted ceiling, every mouth that had ever told her she was nothing. Kaelen's fingers flexed once. Seraphine laughed, sharp and ugly. "Look at her, standing there, in my crown, wearing my title, sleeping in my husband's bed." A murmur rippled through the Solstice delegation. Winterbourne wolves did not murmur. They stared. Aria could not breathe. Her vision narrowed to the finger pointed at her chest. "Princess Seraphine," the ambassador hissed, "this is not the place." "This is exactly the place." Seraphine's voice rose, wild with greed and humiliation. "The entire North should know what kind of filth they have been worshipping." Aria's body went cold all the way through. Filth. There it was. The old word. The true word, according to the world she had come from. Not queen. Not wife. Not Aria. Filth. Seraphine advanced across the ballroom, her gold gown flashing with each furious step. Guests parted around her, not out of respect, but fear of what she might ignite. "She is not royal!" Seraphine shouted. "She is not wolf-blooded. She is not even one of us. She is a cheap human maid from my household. The ballroom erupted. Gasps burst from the Solstice guests. A few Winterbourne wolves snarled. Someone dropped a glass. The orchestra remained frozen on the balcony, bows hanging uselessly above strings. Aria's heart dropped so hard she thought she might faint. The truth was out. Not whispered in a corridor. Not hidden beneath Kaelen's private smile. Out. In the center of Winterbourne power. In front of his executives, his court, his guards, his enemies. She was human. She was low-born. She had stood at his altar, in another woman's veil. She had slept beside him under a stolen title. The room tilted. Kaelen was going to have to punish her now. Even if he had protected her before, he could not protect her from this. Not in public. Not before the North. Not when his authority depended on strength and his reputation depended on blood. If he did not execute her, he would look deceived. Weak. Made a fool by a maid. Aria's lungs refused to work. She saw the altar again. The blade. His blood dripping onto black marble. My blood is sufficient. Had that only delayed this moment? Seraphine stopped 10 feet away, breathing hard, eyes blazing with triumph now that terror had begun spreading across Aria's face. Yes, she said, almost purring. There she is. That is what she really looks like. Not a queen, not a princess. A frightened little servant who stole my place. I didn't steal it, Aria whispered. The words were too soft. No one should have heard. Kaelen heard. Seraphine heard too, because her mouth twisted. You wore my gown. You stood at my altar. You took my crown. You forced me, Aria said, voice breaking. Seraphine's eyes flashed. I gave you an opportunity beyond your station. The Solstice ambassador went gray. Too late. Kaelen's head turned, slowly. Not toward Aria. Toward Seraphine. For the first time since the princess began speaking, the Alpha King of the North looked directly at her. Seraphine faltered. Just for a heartbeat. Then greed steadied her. She lifted her chin, rearranging herself into royal arrogance with practiced speed. Your Majesty, I am Princess Seraphine Vael, your true contracted bride. I was deceived by my own household and delayed from claiming my rightful place. This girl is a human servant. She has no blood, no title, no value. The treaty names me. She stepped closer. Her gaze slid over Kaelen's body again, open now, covetous. She had expected beast and found billionaire king. She had expected sacrifice and found a throne. I have come to correct the insult, she said, her voice softening into something almost seductive. Remove her. Punish her as you see fit. I will take my proper place at your side. Aria's knees nearly buckled. Remove her. Punish her. The words became hands around her throat. She tried to step away from Kaelen, not because she wanted to leave him, because she could not bear to be dragged from him in front of everyone. His arm locked around her waist. Iron. Immediate. Unyielding. She looked up at him, barely seeing through the brightness gathering in her eyes. Kaelen? His gaze dropped to her. The room, the princess, the court, the entire world vanished behind the terrifying focus in his eyes. Do not move away from me, he said. It was not loud. It was not gentle either. It was command and plea woven so tightly together that Aria froze. Seraphine laughed. How touching. Has she trained herself to cling to you as well? Human maids can be so desperate when they smell wealth. A sound moved through Kaelen's chest. Not a growl. Something older. Every wolf in the ballroom lowered their eyes at once. Aria felt it vibrate through the hand at her waist. Seraphine did not understand the warning. She mistook silence for control. She fooled you, she pressed, voice rising again. She fooled all of you. The mighty Winterbourne court kneeling to a maid. The great Alpha King sleeping beside a human fraud. Do you understand what this means? Your marriage is invalid. Your queen is nothing. I am the bride named in the contract. The word nothing struck Aria harder than fraud, because it fit too easily into old wounds. She had been nothing in the Solstice estate. A pair of hands, a pretty face to hide, a body to use as a shield when royalty wanted to escape consequence. For 3 months, Kaelen had made the world pretend otherwise. Now the pretending was over. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, some shocked, some curious, some hostile, some unreadable. The winter crown pressed into her hair, suddenly unbearable. She wanted to take it off before someone ripped it from her. Her hands rose halfway. Kaelen caught her wrist. "Do not," he said. "I'm sorry," she whispered. His face changed. Pain flickered across it, fast and devastating. "You have nothing to apologize for." Seraphine scoffed. "She has everything to apologize for." Kaelen's eyes lifted. The blue in them had gone glacial. "Be very careful," he said. The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. Seraphine's smile wavered, but her arrogance survived where wisdom should have been. "Careful? With respect, Your Majesty. I am the injured party. That maid stole my contracted position. She has committed fraud against 2 empires. If Winterbourne law has any dignity, she should be stripped, exposed, and thrown back into the servants' wing where she belongs." Aria felt the words like blows. Stripped, exposed, thrown back. Her vision blurred. She hated herself for the tears. Hated that Seraphine could still reduce her to this. Hated that some part of her believed every word. Kaelen released Aria's wrist. For one terrible moment, she thought he was letting her go. Then he moved in front of her. Completely. His massive body blocked her from the ballroom, from Seraphine, from every stare. Aria saw only the breadth of his back, the black line of his suit, the controlled rise of his shoulders. The gesture silenced the room more effectively than any command. The Alpha King of the North had placed himself between his exposed bride and the world. Seraphine's face twisted. "Why are you protecting her?" Kaelen said nothing. The silence became unbearable. Seraphine's voice sharpened to a scream. "She is not your queen!" Aria flinched behind him. Kaelen turned his head slightly, as if that tiny movement alone required restraint. Seraphine's finger shook as she pointed past him. "She is Aria Blake, a human maid, a liar, a substitute." Seraphine's facade of victimhood finally snapped under the weight of Kaelen's dismissive silence, giving way to an ugly, frantic truth. "A pathetic little nobody we dressed up because I refused to marry the hideous beast of the North." The words rang through the ballroom. There, the final truth. The ugliest one. The Solstice Empire had not been deceived by Aria. It had used her. Everyone heard it. Even Seraphine seemed to realize too late what she had confessed. Her mouth closed. Her eyes flicked toward the ambassador. His face had gone bloodless. Aria stood behind Kaelen, trembling so badly the crystals on her gown whispered against one another. She knew the truth should matter. She knew Seraphine had revealed herself. But fear had its own logic, and Aria's fear did not care about politics. It cared only that she had been named in front of wolves. Human, maid, liar, nothing. Kaelen slowly turned back to Aria. His expression was unreadable. The room waited. This was the moment, the execution, the rejection, the cold sentence that would end the strange dream she had been living in. Aria looked up at the terrifying man who had held her through the night, carried her through galleries, covered floors for her clumsy feet, and called her queen as if the word belonged to her. Her voice came out broken. "I didn't want to lie to you." Kaelen's eyes darkened. "I know. I thought you would kill me. I know. I was scared." His jaw tightened. "I know." The tenderness in his voice almost destroyed her. Behind him, Seraphine laughed in disbelief. "You know? You knew?" Kaelen did not look away from Aria. "Yes," he said. The word moved through the ballroom like a blade being drawn. Aria stopped breathing. Seraphine's face emptied. The ambassador whispered something that might have been a prayer. Kaelen lifted one hand and touched the edge of the winter crown in Aria's hair, steadying it with a gentleness that made the watching court go still. "I knew the first second she stood before me," he said. "I knew by her scent. I knew by her fear. I knew by the calluses your empire tried to hide beneath silk. Aria's lips parted. Kaelen's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek. I knew, he continued, voice low and terrible, and I chose her anyway. Seraphine recoiled as if struck. For one heartbeat, hope flared so sharply in Aria's chest it hurt. Then Kaelen turned back toward the ballroom. His hand remained around Aria's, his aura unfurled. Not the restrained pressure she had grown used to. Not the quiet dominance that made servants bow and executives fall silent. This was the full darkness of the Alpha King of the North, cold and vast and merciless, rolling across the ballroom until every wolf inside it dropped to their knees. Solstice nobles collapsed with cries of pain. Winterbourne executives bowed instantly. The orchestra fell to the balcony floor. Seraphine alone remained half standing for a moment, pride fighting biology, before her knees hit the rug. Kaelen looked down at her. Now, he said softly, scream again. No one moved. Aria stood behind him, shaking, exposed, crowned, and still alive. The music had stopped. The lie had shattered. The real princess knelt at the feet of the beast she had rejected. And Kaelen Cross, gorgeous, ruthless, monstrous Alpha King, held Aria's hand as if letting go of the human maid would be the only unforgivable crime in the room. The ballroom was so silent that Aria could hear the faint crackle of blue fire in the chandeliers. Every wolf knelt. Every solstice noble trembled. Every Winterbourne executive kept their gaze lowered, not because they feared punishment from their king, but because they understood they were witnessing the moment before a kingdom died. Aria stood behind Kaelen Cross with the winter crown in her hair and the truth exposed like a wound. Her hand was still trapped in his, small inside his powerful grip, and her pulse beat so violently she thought it might tear her apart. Seraphine Vale knelt on the rug in the center of the ballroom, her golden gown pooled around her like spilled wealth. Her face had gone pale beneath its perfect cosmetics. For the first time since Aria had known her, the real Solstice Princess looked uncertain. Not humbled. Not yet. Only confused that her beauty, title, and outrage had not immediately rearranged the room in her favor. Kaelen's ice-blue eyes rested on her with terrifying calm. He did not shout. He did not bare his teeth. He did not give the ballroom the satisfaction of rage. Instead, he turned to Aria. The motion was slow enough that everyone saw it. He stepped back until his massive body surrounded her again, one arm sliding around her waist, pulling her trembling form flush against his broad chest. Aria gasped softly as his warmth closed around her. She felt the hard plane of his body through the delicate fabric of her gown, felt the steady power of him, the shield of him, the warning to every living thing in the room. Mine. He bent his head and kissed her hair. Not her crown, her hair. The gesture was so tender that it hurt more than any cruelty could have. Aria's eyes burned. Kaelen, she whispered. I have you, he murmured against her. The words sank into her like heat entering frozen skin. Seraphine made a strangled sound. This is absurd! Kaelen lifted his head. The tenderness vanished from his face, leaving something older and colder in its place. Absurd, he repeated. His voice was quiet, but alpha power echoed through it until the chandeliers trembled and every kneeling wolf bowed lower. Seraphine swallowed. Kaelen's arm remained locked around Aria, his hand spread over her waist, large and possessive, holding her so securely that, even when her knees weakened, she did not fall. I knew exactly who she was the second she walked into my citadel. The sentence moved through the ballroom like a blade sliding free. Aria stopped breathing. Seraphine stared at him. The Solstice ambassador made a small, broken sound. Kaelen continued, each word calm enough to be merciless. I knew she was not Princess Seraphine Vale. I knew she was human. I knew she was frightened. I knew she was a servant your empire had dressed in silk and sent to die in your place. Seraphine's lips parted. Then the marriage is invalid? No. The word struck with enough force that several Solstice wolves flinched. Kaelen's eyes turned glacial. The contract required the Solstice Empire to send me a bride. You sent Aria Blake. I accepted her before witnesses. I took vows before winter law. I placed my blood on the altar. She became my wife because I chose her. Not because you loaned me your title. Seraphine's face twisted. She is nothing. Aria flinched before she could stop herself. Kaelen felt it. The room felt what came after. His aura unfurled, darker this time, not wild but precise. It pressed down on the ballroom until crystal glasses cracked on their trays. Say that again, he said. Seraphine's mouth closed. Kaelen looked past her. Rowan. A man stepped out from the line of Winterbourne executives. Aria had met him only twice. Rowan Vale was not related to Seraphine, despite the unfortunate shared name, and he had once explained the coincidence with the expression of a man personally offended by fate. He was Kaelen's executive assistant, a lean, silver-haired wolf in a black suit, with wire-rimmed glasses and the grave efficiency of someone who could schedule a hostile takeover before breakfast. He carried a leather case. At Kaelen's nod, Rowan opened it and withdrew a stack of documents so thick they landed on the rug with a heavy, final sound. Then came another stack, and another. Folder after folder hit the floor in front of the Solstice delegation. Corporate seals, asset ledgers, court orders, debt transfers, acquisition agreements, dissolution notices, labor audits, banking liens, frozen trust accounts, title revocations. Paper, Aria realized, could sound like thunder when it contained the end of a world. Kaelen's voice carried over the kneeling crowd. For 3 months, while the Solstice Empire congratulated itself on deceiving me, Winterbourne Conglomerate conducted a full private review of your holdings. The ambassador began to shake his head. Your Majesty, surely there has been some misunderstanding. There has not. Rowan adjusted his glasses. All materials have been verified by independent tribunal accountants, northern corporate courts, and treaty compliance officers. Seraphine's father, Lord Alistair Vale, pushed himself halfway upright, his face mottled red with panic. This is illegal. You cannot simply seize sovereign assets. Kaelen looked at him. The man dropped back to his knees. I did not seize them, Kaelen said. I bought them. The ballroom went colder. Aria stared at the documents, unable to understand. Kaelen's hand moved gently over her waist, grounding her even as he destroyed an empire with his voice. Your mines were over-leveraged. I bought the debt. Your agricultural estates were collateralized against luxury imports. I bought the lenders. Your transport companies were hiding unpaid wages. I funded the workers' claims and took ownership through the courts. Your palace trust was backed by false valuations. I exposed them. Your private security forces were operating through shell contracts. I acquired those contracts before you knew they were for sale. He paused. The silence was absolute. Your empire was not powerful. It was expensive. Seraphine's eyes widened. The ambassador whispered, No. Yes, Rowan said crisply. Over the past 3 months, Winterbourne has secretly acquired every controlling stake through ghost corporations. And as of 60 seconds ago, triggered by Princess Seraphine's public confession of treaty fraud, the execution orders were automatically filed. The Solstice Empire's commercial assets are officially liquidated, its governing estates placed under creditor administration, and its executive families stripped of all treaty-protected financial privileges. Lord Alistair's face drained of color. You cannot strip our titles. Kaelen's expression did not change. No. Your own law did that. Rowan removed another document. Clause 17 of the Solstice Internal Succession Charter. Any noble house found guilty of fraudulent substitution in a treaty marriage forfeits inherited diplomatic standing, all court stipends, and all derivative titles pending tribunal review. The ambassador looked as if he might be sick. Seraphine's mother released a thin cry. That clause is ceremonial. It was, Kaelen said, until you made it useful. Aria could not speak. She stood against his chest, trembling for a different reason now. He had known. All along he had known. Not only about her. About them. About the hands that had forced her into a veil, the mouths that had called her disposable, the family that had gambled with her life and expected wealth to protect them forever. For 3 months, while he carried her through halls and teased her about forks and slept with his face buried against her neck, he had been quietly dismantling the people who hurt her. Not with claws, not with blood, with contracts, with audits, with debt, with the terrifying patience of a king who did not need to raise his voice to end a dynasty. Seraphine pushed herself upright again, shaking with fury. You did this for her? Kaelen's gaze flicked briefly to Aria, and the coldness in his face softened with such intensity that her heart nearly broke. Yes. The word was simple. It ruined Seraphine more thoroughly than the documents. Her eyes filled with jealous disbelief. She is a maid. She was a maid, Kaelen said, because your family required someone to scrub floors while you purchased gowns with stolen wages. She is human. She is my mate. The entire ballroom changed. Not loudly. Not with a gasp this time. Not with a murmur. It changed like the world stopping its old rotation and beginning another. Aria went utterly still. My mate. The words rang inside her skull. Not fake bride. Not convenient queen. Not a secret he had allowed to survive. Mate. Fated mate. The ancient, impossible bond wolves whispered about with reverence and fear. The bond stronger than contract, bloodline, empire, or law. Her. A human maid with calloused hands. Kaelen's arm tightened, as if he felt the shock pass through her. He did not look away from Seraphine. You sent her to my altar believing I would kill her, he said. Instead, you delivered me the only woman in existence I was born to protect. Seraphine looked as though she had been slapped. No, she whispered. Yes, Kaelen said. Her gaze snapped to Aria with pure hatred. You stole everything. Aria's throat tightened. For once, before fear could silence her, anger answered. No, Aria said. Her voice was quiet, but Kaelen went very still behind her, as if the sound mattered more than the empire falling at his feet. Aria looked at Seraphine. Really looked at her. At the perfect hair, the trembling jewels, the beautiful face warped by greed. You threw it away, Aria said. You threw me away too. You said if the beast killed me, you would lose nothing. The words landed. The Winterbourne wolves heard them. The servants heard them. The Solstice nobles heard them. Seraphine's face crumpled, not with guilt, but with the terror of finally being understood. Kaelen lowered his mouth to Aria's ear. Well done, my queen. A shiver went through her. He straightened. Security! The black-clad guards moved immediately. Lord Alistair scrambled back. You would not dare lay hands on Solstice royalty. Kaelen's eyes were merciless. There is no Solstice royalty in this room. The words struck harder than a sentence of death. No blood will be shed tonight, Kaelen said. Winterbourne has no need to dirty its floors with bankrupt cruelty. Seraphine Vale, Alistair Vale, Marcelin Vale, and every signatory who authorized the fraudulent substitution of my wife will be escorted from this citadel. Your personal assets have been frozen pending restitution to the workers you exploited. Your estates are under receivership. Your labor camps are no longer privately owned. Seraphine's mother sobbed. Kaelen's voice sharpened. And because Solstice law requires debtors to repay through labor contribution, you will be assigned to the very camps your families once operated. The ballroom held its breath. Aria felt no satisfaction at the thought of suffering, but she did feel justice. Not blood, not screams, something cleaner. The high-born hands that had pushed servants into hunger would now learn the weight of hunger. The people who had owned labor as if it were furniture would wake before dawn, stand in line, answer to overseers, and discover what their luxury had cost. Seraphine surged to her feet, but the guards caught her arms. Kaelen, she cried, panic stripping the polish from her voice. Your Majesty, please. I was mistaken. I was afraid. I never meant. You meant every word, he said. Her eyes darted to Aria. Tell him. Tell him to stop. You were a servant. You know mercy. Aria's breath caught. For years, mercy had been demanded from her by people who never offered it back. Kaelen did not speak for her. He waited. Aria looked at the woman who had forced a veil over her face and sent her toward death. Then she said, The staff in those camps will eat warm bread before dawn. Kaelen's smile was slow, proud, and devastating. Rowan made a note. Seraphine screamed as the guards escorted her away. No one followed. No one defended her. The Solstice delegation collapsed in disgrace around the documents that proved their ruin. Titles that had seemed eternal dissolved under signatures and seals. The empire that had once glittered like summer gold was revealed, in the end, to be nothing but debt wearing perfume. Kaelen kept Aria tucked against him until the ballroom emptied. Executives withdrew. Guards removed the disgraced guests. Servants began clearing shattered glass with careful hands. The orchestra did not resume. There was no need. The night had already reached its final note. When the doors closed at last, Aria stood alone with Kaelen beneath the chandeliers. Her whole body shook. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then she reached up with unsteady hands and touched the winter crown. I don't know how to wear this, she whispered. Kaelen turned her gently to face him. Without the court watching, he looked less like a tyrant and more like the man who had held himself still night after night so she would not be afraid. Still enormous, still devastating, still powerful enough to ruin empires. But his eyes, when they rested on her, were almost vulnerable. Yes, you do, he said. She shook her head. No. I don't. I was pretending the whole time. I know. I am not elegant. You are. I am not noble. You are more noble than anyone born in that rotten palace. Her eyes filled. I am not a princess. No. The word should have hurt. It did not, because he smiled. You are my queen. Aria's tears slipped free. Kaelen watched them fall with the expression of a man witnessing something sacred and unbearable. Then, slowly, he lowered himself. The Alpha King of the North dropped to one knee. Aria stopped breathing. He was still taller than some men even kneeling. His black suit stretched across his broad shoulders. His face tilted up toward hers, fierce and beautiful, the blue of his eyes softened by devotion so intense it frightened and healed her at once. He took her hands. Not her crown, not her title, not the glittering proof Winterbourne had placed upon her. Her hands. The calloused ones. The hands that had scrubbed floors, stolen scraps, mended torn linens, carried trays, and trembled beneath silk gloves at his altar. Kaelen bowed his head and kissed them. Aria made a broken sound. Again he kissed her knuckles, then her palms, then the roughened place at the base of each finger, as if every mark left by labor deserved worship. You never have to pretend again, he said. Her breath hitched. Do you understand me, Aria Blake? Never again. Not for my court. Not for my empire. Not for me. She could barely see him through tears. But you needed a princess. No. His mouth brushed her palm. I needed you. The words undid her. She sank down before him, the skirt of her winter gown spilling across the rug, and suddenly they were both on their knees beneath the chandeliers, king and queen, beast and bride, tyrant and trembling girl, no throne between them. You knew I was human, she whispered. Yes. You knew I was poor. Yes. You knew I was lying. His hand came to her cheek. I knew you were afraid. She closed her eyes. His thumb brushed away another tear. You are my fated mate, he said. My only queen, my only bride, my only weakness, my only law. Aria's heart broke open with a sweetness so sharp it almost hurt. For 3 months she had waited for punishment. Instead, she had been loved. Clumsily at first, because she did not know how to receive it. Terrifyingly, because Kaelen Cross loved the way he ruled, with totality, strategy, and ruin for anyone who threatened what belonged under his protection. Tenderly, because the same hands that signed away empires could hold hers as if she were made of candlelight. She leaned forward and kissed him. Kaelen went still for half a heartbeat. Then, his control shattered. Not violently, joyfully. His arms closed around her, lifting her into his lap as he kissed her back with months of restraint finally breaking into devotion. His mouth was warm, demanding, reverent. One hand spread across her back, the other cradled her head beneath the crown, careful even in passion. Aria clung to his shoulders, feeling the strength of him, the tremor he could not hide, the impossible truth that this terrifying man had been waiting for her to choose him, too. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "You are shaking," she whispered. His laugh was low and rough. "You kissed me." "I am your wife." His eyes darkened with love. "Say that again. I am your wife. And," she smiled through tears, "your mate." Kaelen closed his eyes as if the words had entered his blood. Far above them, winter roses glimmered in the chandeliers. Beyond the ballroom doors, the citadel breathed quietly, changed forever by a human girl who had once crept to the kitchens for scraps. The floors were soft. The servants were fed. The tyrant had learned gentleness not because power had left him, but because love had given his power a purpose. Aria had believed a flawless disguise might save her. She had believed beauty, silence, and obedience were the only shields a powerless girl could carry. She had believed that being known meant being destroyed. But true love had not required her to perform perfection. It had not asked her to erase the calluses from her hands or turn fear into arrogance. It had not demanded royal blood, polished manners, or a lie beautiful enough to survive a ballroom. True love had looked directly at her vulnerable self and chosen her there. Not despite the truth, because of it. And sometimes, the safest place in the world was not a peaceful kingdom or a gentle room. Sometimes, it was the arms of someone powerful enough to see every wound, every secret, every trembling piece of who you were, and say to the world, "This one is mine, and no one will ever make her afraid again." Years later, when the North told the story, they never called Aria Blake the substitute bride. They called her the Winter Queen. They spoke of the night the Solstice Empire fell without a drop of blood, undone by ledgers, signatures, and the wrath of a king who loved a maid. They spoke of warm bread in the servants' halls, rugs over marble floors, and a crown that looked brighter on a human woman than it ever had on royalty. And in the private rooms of Winterbourne Citadel, where blue fire warmed the glass and snow fell silently beyond the windows, Kaelen Cross still slept with his face buried against Aria's neck, listening to the heartbeat that had conquered him against Aria's neck, listening to the heartbeat that had conquered him from the first breath. Only now, Aria no longer lay frozen with fear. She turned into his arms. She laughed when he growled at the morning light for waking her too soon. She kissed the scar on his chest when he pretended not to need comfort. She walked barefoot across antique rugs that had once shocked the entire court and accepted the way he watched every step as if gravity itself remained a personal enemy. And when he took her calloused hand in public, bowed over it, and kissed her knuckles before nobles, executives, and foreign ambassadors, Aria no longer wondered when the punishment would come. She only smiled. Because the beast had never wanted a perfect princess. He had wanted the girl beneath the veil. If you enjoyed this audiobook romance, subscribe for more dramatic love stories, powerful alpha heroes, emotional twists, and satisfying happily ever afters.